fellow members, it's Andre Ferdinands once again, and sitting beside me is Mark Ceglinski. Welcome.
Thanks, Andre. Thanks for having me back.
Mark and I have been talking over the last couple of weeks about Tangiers. We spoke about Mark himself, Mark's team, Tangiers as a company. Then we spoke about Morocco, if you remember last week. A lot of you have seen that video and have sent me some comments on that. Thank you. Today, we're going to talk about the Australian assets. We're going to talk about WA, Northern Territory, and Mark's going to give us as much information as he can. And hopefully at the end of this, all of our members will have a good view on what Tangiers does, what you're doing in Africa, Northwest Africa, and now what you're doing in Northern Territory and WA.
Indeed. Well, shall I give you a little bit of background and history to the Australian assets? We got involved in this company really because of the Moroccan opportunity. And we did have assets in Australia, but at that point in time, we weren't really certain of what their potential was. And if you were to look at this company 12 months ago, probably there was 95% of the value in the company attributed to Morocco. If you look at the company today, I think at least half, maybe even two-thirds of the value actually relates to the Australian assets. Now, whether that's reflecting our share price or not, it's a different question altogether. But what it does demonstrate is just how exciting the Australian assets are. So why don't I give you a bit of an overview, because there's various elements to these assets. We have two permits. One sits on the Northern Territory side of the offshore borders, one sits on the West Australian side. And within those permits, we have really three different projects, if you like, over multiple horizons. It's a big set of permits. It's over 4,000 square kilometres. So again, there's a lot of opportunities here. But what it's best known for is what was known as the Turtle Barnett discoveries. And those discoveries were made in the mid-80s. And they discovered oil, and they had gas as well at that point in time, but gas wasn't really of interest economically. In fact, it was flared back in those days. But it was a known oil discovery, appraised in the late 80s, 1989, and it flowed on drill steam tests, 700 barrels a day, 920 barrels a day. So very good rates of flowing from these reservoirs, very good quality oil, it was 38-degree API oil, and most micro caps or junior companies would be delighted to have a well that is generating 1,000 barrels per day. So Turtle Barnett is a known quantity, and it's been appraised as well. It sits in the shallower part of our particular permit. Now, no one attributes any value to this project whatsoever. What we think it might ultimately look like is a multi-well development, might be 4 or 5 wells tied back to a converted jack-up rig, producing 4,000 or 5,000 barrels per day. Now, anyone out there who looks at equity valuations would have some sort of sense of what that might be worth. But I can tell you right now, when people look at our company, they don't put any value onto those assets whatsoever. That's really just the tip of the iceberg, literally, with this particular project. So in the shallower part of these permits, we've got Turtle and Barnett and the various oil accumulations that sit there, and gas. About 6 weeks ago, we came out with an announcement about the Milligan Span. And the Milligan Span is another strata and series of formations which we've been mapping. And we've mapped 14 leads at this point in time and counting. Now, what's so exciting about this is we've identified the structures, we've done the work, we've mapped those, and we've put some volumes around those as well. And we did this because of the farm-out process that we're going to talk about in a little while. But we put some volumes on there, up to 1.5 billion barrels oil in place, up to 500 million barrels recoverable. Now, it's one thing having structures, as I've said before. It's another thing about, do you have an active hydrocarbon system? Do you have source migration into traps and reservoirs and seals? What is fantastic about the Milligan Span, and is completely underappreciated, I think, is that this is an active hydrocarbon system. Not only do we have, in the shallow portion of our permit here, known oil and gas that has been discovered and appraised, but when those appraisal wells were drilled back in the late 80s, they actually intersected these reservoirs. They recovered high quality oil and they recovered gas to surface as well. For me, this is one of the greatest opportunities from an oil perspective in Australia right now, except for our next opportunity.
Okay.
So, we've talked about Turtle Barnett, We then have the Milligan's band, and then lower strata we have two structures. One we called Nova, which crests at about 3,500 metres. The next structure is called Supernova, and that crests at about 6,000 metres. So they're quite some way down. They are deeper structures, but we've put some volumes around that, and we put out some probabilistic estimates, which are company internal figures, which we released about August of last year. And we thought about 70 TCF combined best estimate of those two structures. So that's not saying there's gas there. What that's just simply saying is that that structure could house that amount of gas. We actually went one step further because we've listed on AIM earlier this year, and we needed to have an independent expert actually go through this process for us. And they looked at the top part of the structure for Nova alone. So they didn't look at the deeper parts of Nova, they didn't look at Supernova, but they opined that the top part of Nova had the potential to contain about 7 TCF of gas. So that's a really large structure in anyone's language, anywhere around the world. So if you like, they're the 4 different horizons to our Northern Territory and WA permits.
Okay. Now, which one of those 4, if not all of them, was referred to in London recently? I heard a comment there from one of the junior partners in Tangiers. They said this was one of the greatest opportunities, oil and gas in Australia, possibly ever. What was that about?
So we've made a case for Nova and Supernova, and viewers will see the details on our previous announcements and also in our presentations as well. But we've made the case that Nova and Supernova are gas. And that's just based on the rock types and what we see on the seismic at this point in time, and the various analogues and tying back previous and historic wells as well. Now, we're quite delighted with gas because the thing about where our project is located is a strategic location. Most times when you find gas, the very first question you have is, can I ever monetize this, right? Will I be able to get it to a market? Is there an energy market that's looking for the gas? And if it is there any infrastructure in place? Now, why we haven't been afraid of gas is because of our location. We're close to Darwin, 250 odd kilometres as the crow flies. Obviously, Darwin's the home of an existing LNG plant and a future LNG plant that's been planned right now. It's gone through final investment decision. Through our permit runs an easement, and there is an existing pipeline that goes to the Northern Territory mainland. And so if we ever have a gas discovery, we believe there's quite a lot of opportunities to monetize that. If it's a small discovery, when I say small, I say 1 TCF, that's big in most people's language, but if it's small, we think there's domestic sales opportunities, and certainly there's a lot of industrial customers looking for gas. If it's large, then we see bigger opportunities as well. Darwin is the LNG hub now of Australia. Now, whilst we make the case for gas, others who have looked at this project, including our joint venture partner in this project, believe it could be oil. And that particular comment was just drawing light to the fact that if you had a 7 TCF structure just at the top, we're not talking about the entirety of the structure, and that was oil, and converted that into oil on any typical sort of metrics, it would be, in their words, the most substantial oil discovery in Australia. Now, we're not saying that that's the case whatsoever, but it just gives you some element or some insight into the excitement that we have about Nova, Supernova, Milligan's, as well as our known oil discovery, Turtle Barnett.
Okay. I think there's a 1 to 6 ratio normally, gas to oil.
Yeah, there's sort of a back of an envelope, sort of 1 to 6 sort of ratio. Yeah.
Which puts the find at just over 1 billion oil.
That could be a back of the envelope calculation, I suppose, yeah.
Okay. Joint venture. Now, we spoke about the Moroccan joint venture last week. Let's talk about Australia, where you can.
Yep.
Are we talking about the same partner? Potentially the same partner? Or are they just so different, so far away that you're having, a different conversation with one of the majors?
Sure. Well, let's take a few steps back, I suppose. As we've explained in previous weeks, our business model is one of finding open acreage, bidding work programs, doing very good technical work to make the case for prospects, high grading those prospects, and then to farm out. So that's been our plan with not only Morocco but Australia as well, and that's been an ongoing process. If you were to look at the Australian assets, let's say June of last year, there's very little interest in those assets. Everyone just thought about Turtle Barnett and didn't really think much about Turtle Barnett either. They didn't sort of appreciate the potential, particularly with current oil prices there as well. Since that date, We identified Nova and Supernova, August, September of last year. Did the CPR on those, which was earlier this year. And just 6 weeks ago came out with Milligan's Fan. So, as with all of these farm out processes, it's important not to rush sometimes, because if we'd done a deal on this asset 12 months ago, we probably would have given it away for almost nothing in many ways. But we've added so much substantial value to the point that, as I said, it might not just be the equal of Morocco, it may even have greater value than Morocco because of the known certainties of the active hydrocarbon system that's there and the known discoveries that we have as well. So again, we had a kind of similar to Morocco, a soft data room process that we've been running for since last year, and meanwhile continuing to complete all of our technical work. And we completed that technical work really about 6 or 7 weeks ago when we came out with the Milligan's Fan announcements and the CPR as well. So our farm out process for Australia is being run by a technical group in Perth called Tangiers Petroleum Consultants, and they did some of the earlier technical work for us on some of these projects as well. That mirrors that process that we have in London, other than it's predominantly players focused on Australasia. And what you'll see globally right now is a lot of people are coming to Australia because of the certainties around the fiscal regime, and it's a mature oil and gas market. From a gas perspective, it's about exporting, it's about finding lots of gas, going to LNG and exporting, and of course we're always looking for oil in Australia as well. So again, we're looking at fairly substantial companies to move into this farm out, basically, to give our viewers some sort of indication of what we see as the future exploration program here. We think that we'd like to drill 2 wells in Australia. One of those would be on the WA side of the permits, one would be in the Northern Territory side of the permits, and I'll talk a little bit about drill locations in a moment. And they're not cheap wells relative to onshore or to Morocco. They're about maybe $60-odd million a piece, but they're pretty cheap compared to what people are doing around the world now, spending $80 to $120 million deeper offshore, whether it's offshore northwest or if you go to the Gulf of Mexico. So they're relatively cheap, if you like. And of course, we're going to be testing multiple zones, very large targets along the way as well. So, we'll be looking for to be carried through preferably 2 wells and to shoot some more seismic as well, some 3D. So the sorts of companies that can write those checks out are the large companies. It's, again, super majors, large independents, national oil companies, and we have a good smattering of those in our data room right now. And there's certainly, because of the nature of the companies, they're global companies, they've got operations in different jurisdictions, so it won't be by design that we'll do 1, 2 farm outs with the one group, although it's certainly possible.
Okay. So we're talking about, again, similar to Morocco, the super majors, the tier 1s?
We believe these are potentially world-class opportunities, right, and they're attractive to big companies.
Okay. Now, you mentioned Milligan's. Now, you went into trading halt about 4 or 5 weeks ago. On the back of the Milligan's Fan opportunity. Can you just elaborate a little bit more on why that deserved a trading halt?
Yeah. The way Milligan's, I suppose, matured as an opportunity was kind of interesting. I think last week we talked about the farm out process, how you have to do technical work. You then need to document your technical work into a document that potential farminees can understand at the macro level before they delve in and do their own technical work. And it was really as we were completing this process, we thought we'd better spend more time on Milligan's. We always identified the opportunity, but we hadn't had the time. We're a very small team to actually go down and actually start to map this particular opportunity in more detail. But as we were going through the farm out process, it just started to become and documenting it, very, very evident that Milligan's was a tremendously exciting opportunity. It's rare in Australia that you'll find so many leads of such great volumes in an active hydrocarbon area. And so we see Milligan's as perhaps one of the most advanced oil opportunities in Australia right now, sitting underneath an existing oil discovery. And perhaps the only opportunity that could eclipse that is if you think Nova and Supernova's oil, in which case that's the best opportunity and Milligan's the second best.
Okay, let's talk about this this is interesting. So the only thing you think that can top Milligan is another one of your own assets. No other asset in Australia with no other company.
Look, I'm an advocate for my own assets, right? And we spend, our team's worked on many assets around Australia and around the world, but, these are truly exciting opportunities. Now, let me put all the caveats out there to our listeners. I mean, we still need to drill these and we need to discover them and prove that there's reservoirs and there's migration of hydrocarbons into the area, but it's a fantastic position to start from, and I think a lot of companies would be very envious and would be keen to be in a similar position.
Now, Old Park Lane, they've looked into the Australian assets and they've put an evaluation out, but not on all of the assets.
No. And similarly, Shore Capital as well, they've looked in it. But essentially, if you were to look at those valuations at this point in time, where they've put a value is where we've got CPRs. So we have a CPR, Competent Persons Report, on the Milligans. We have a CPR on the top part of the Nova structure, not the lower part of the structure, and not Supernova, and there's no CPR on Turtle Barnett either. So, again, you've got some idea of potential value on a risk basis for some of our assets within Australia, but I think the potential is far greater than what we see at this stage.
Okay, and just remind our members, if you can, what was in the Shore Capital and the Old Park Lane evaluation?
Old Park Lane ascribed about 55 cents, I think, for Milligans, and a similar number at the end of the day for the top part of Nova, so about $1 a share. Add that to the $1.40 for the 4 Jurassic prospects in Morocco, not Zeus, Little Zeus, all the Cretaceous, and it was about $2.40 a share, basically.
So where to from here, Mark? Both from if you can help members from a Morocco and an Australian point of view, this will be the last time we'll meet for a while. What do you need to do from here to assure shareholders, or to demonstrate to shareholders and potential shareholders that TPT is on the right path?
Well, look, we're busy. We've got a lot on our plate, and first of which is the 2 farm outs that we're working on right now. So both for Morocco and Australia, our shareholders and TopStock members will see in the near future further developments there as we progress towards deals and papering those deals, basically, where we can announce them. So that's imminent. Then what we have, of course, is the ongoing work. Right, we don't stop working just because we're farming out. So right now we're doing our planning for our drilling in Morocco. So we've identified our drill locations. We're finalising the processing of our new 3D, making inquiries about rigs and rig availability, and of course final decisions will be dependent on our JV partner and their own timing and whether they have rigs available as well. But we're working on all of those processes in Morocco. In Australia, again, the farm outs. We're currently working on our 3D campaign. We'd like to acquire some new 3D, which covers the bulk of Turtle Barnett, most of the Milligans leads, although there's some that we won't cover in the first program, and of course Nova and Supernova as well. So we're working on that planning right now, and there's environmental approvals and other approvals, ship availability and the like. And of course planning for drilling, because we want to drill these prospects, and we've got drill ready locations that we think we have for all of the projects in Australia, Turtle Barnett, Milligans, Nova and Supernova, and in fact, interestingly, we think we can drill all of those with a single drill hole as well. So we're working on all of those things, and our shareholders will see more information on that coming out in due course. The other aspect is we're not sitting idly. We're looking for other projects. We think a skill in identifying opportunities and developing them to the next level. So we're looking at bid rounds in different parts of the world, including Morocco and Australia. And we've got an internal goal of adding to our portfolio in the next 12 months. So we hope to be able to do that soon as well. So we think all in up, we've got a small company with some fantastic assets that we have very significant positions in, with magnificent upside and the ability to add to the portfolio as well.
Okay, so in summary, for the next 6 months or so, you've got seismic data, 1 that you're processing already, 2 that you'd like to acquire some more. You've got joint venture deals or farming deals to sign, potentially 2 of them, and then you've got some drills, some
all
wells
the drilling
to drill,
planning that we're doing, and Of course, once we've finalised the JVs, we'll be able to start talking a little bit more about specific timings on some of those elements as well.
And I think you mentioned earlier that you already started, even in parallel with signing the JV, looking at drilling availability, rig availability, seasonal availability.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep. We don't stop working just because we're doing a farm out.
Okay. Mark, thank you so much
My
for
pleasure.
coming in. It's been a pleasure to
Thanks
to
for your
meet
time,
you.
and thank you to all the TopStock members for taking time to watch this video.
Team, Mark Ceglinski, please send your feedback underneath this post. I'm really hoping, Mark, now a question for you. Will you be able to come back and talk to myself and our members again?
I would be delighted to come back and fill you in on how we're going, and we can mark off the report card.
Wonderful, wonderful. Look forward to it. Thank you again. It's Andre Ferdinands here.